TikTok just told sellers if the voice selling you a product isn't a real person live on camera, it can now cost your entire shop.
Cut to Will Ferrell, and he had the visor with the hawk written on it.
Yeah. It's the last frontier of authenticity. We don't want you faking this.
If you're going to broadcast the sport, main priority needs to be serving the fans that care about that sport.
Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the Attention Shift podcast. I'm joined by Andy Marston as ever. Andy, good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you, Ed.
Cool, so here we go. Let's dive straight in. So YouTube Creator Pulse, they've done a report around what's been going on for creators around the World Cup. And the interesting statistic even is 66% of Gen Z fans use YouTube before and after the live sport or event itself. So YouTube are calling that surround sound of the game. Interesting. They've used Erling Haaland as one of the creators, and they've called him a creator, not a player, in the context of this report. And they are now using this as a means to steer brands towards takeovers and selected lineups, which are some new features that they're pushing that creators are able to do. So I think what's interesting here is that, like, something I think that certainly I've talked about for quite some time, and I think it's always been a mindset that the moment that matters is not necessarily just a game window, but it's far bigger than that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think as you've seen with a lot of the engagement, particularly on digital with streams, it's like people just almost want that like company around it. Like they want to see what the reaction is, or like in the build up, like how are people thinking about this. And then what's people's reactions post game, and that's almost like the more social part than the actual match itself. So yeah, I think it's almost like a digital group chat kind of element, right? Like people want that validation of like, are people also moaning about that penalty decision, or people also moaning about that red card? They want to see what like other people's almost interpretation of the event was. I don't know if that's also how you see it, but.
Yeah, I think the reality is I was chatting to my daughter the other day and we were chatting about Netflix and she just describes that as TV, right? So it's amazing how things have transitioned and how, ultimately you see it how you see it. But I think similarly, a lot of the people who are watching that kind of social content on YouTube now, those discussions, those conversations, they just see that as sports content, whether it includes rights or not. I don't think it really matters to people. Because if it's good content and there's good opinion in there, and whether they agree with it or disagree with it, it entertains and it makes them feel part of it. It's the kind of content they want to consume, so don't get bogged down about who has the rights, where it sits. It doesn't really matter to them. Yeah.
And I guess one other thing to shout out would just be like Erling Haaland's rise during this World Cup has been incredible. And like outside of obviously Spain being the winners of the tournament, he's probably the winner from an individual perspective in terms of like how much positivity I've heard around him post and during this World Cup.
Absolutely, yeah. I think the way he's lent into showing his experience, and there's been a real halo effect around him and Norway and everything that they've done at the World Cup, at the fans and the row, but the way he's really lent in to try and give a different perspective behind the scenes of what it's like to be at a World Cup. And I saw Seb Lazardo actually post about this on LinkedIn today. Not only that, he was pointing out that, look, there's all these things you know about Erling Haaland, right? No one's saying anything new in terms of who he is. Have a look at what he's done with dubbing. He's now, I think Seb said he's now dubbing his content in 41 different languages. And you look at the spike, and Seb's saying that actually, yes, part of that is the way that he's really lent in to create the content that he's had, but part of that is he's making it accessible to audiences all over the world too. So the sweet spot of putting all of those things together has seen him have a meteoric rise over the last 5-6 weeks.
Yeah, and I think it's also like the element of authenticity that he brings to all of his content, like particularly on Snapchat. Like he's sharing stuff as if it's like your mate that you've got on Snapchat sending you like a meme with a filter that like he's like not afraid to look silly or to like kind of be a bit goofy. And I think that kind of like really enamors him to a lot of people because they're like, oh, he's not trying to be this big shot. Like I've spoke to a few people that don't even follow football and they're just like, I love Haaland now.
Yeah.
Which I just think is like, yeah, it's interesting and good to see that kind of like positive side of football and social media, and like he's basically everything that's kind of good about the World Cup, and this kind of like additional access that you get through platforms like Snapchat and YouTube and others.
Absolutely. I think that there's real benefit there. There's benefit to the Norwegian national team. There's benefit to the platforms. It's not just him-centric, the way he goes about doing this. It's going to be really interesting to see how he now, coming back into Premier League season once he's had his holidays, and I'm sure he'll be sharing loads of stuff while he's having his holidays as well, but coming back into that sort of week-to-week club scenario, how he continues to do that. Because I think he started about a year ago out with YouTube and dabbled a little bit, and there was quite a few people that were talking about what's he going to do next, how's he going to go about it, and I think he's taking his time to find the way that he wants to do it. And like I said, like they've obviously thought about this is the plan now, and it seems like everything's worked out for them exactly how they planned to work out for it. And I think it's not done any harm that his performances and the way that Norway have performed in general as a team too, everything's just come together. Now he's got a real opportunity to build on that too. But I think you're right, the point you made there about how it's not just about football fans. Like, people want to understand who he is as an individual, what his personality is, what he believes in, and everything that comes with it too. And he was great. I saw, like, obviously he's done everything he's done during the World Cup, and then I think the next day, I think he was at some fashion event in Italy, dressed up like, and he really transitioned into almost like he went to sort of to the fashion side of things as well. So it just feels like clearly there's a plan to everything, but it doesn't look forced.
Yeah, I think it's a great example. There's been a few players that have gained like huge followings off the back of the World Cup, but I think he's probably in the best position to sustain it long term.
Absolutely. All right, the next story. So, Unrivaled's Coffee Club. So they are doing Unrivaled, which is the basketball event that happens once a year in the US. They're doing a coffee club event in Chicago on the 24th of July, so later this week. There are going to be some sponsors involved in this too. Interestingly, every slot filled on this coffee club event in under an hour, and for Unrivaled, who are not the main league, they are this upstart league that have come into basketball. To be able to do something like this in the off season as a fan touch point, I think he's telling. I think you made a really good point earlier about why coffee club is important compared to how most of these events do happen, right?
Yeah, well, like with Sports Pundit, I've kind of tested it, obviously, with a lot less demand than Unrivaled have. But we do like the social drinks, where like it will invite people for drinks. But I think potentially the networking drinks or anything that involves alcohol is maybe more intimidating to some people, but also potentially excludes some people. So I think the fact they've chosen for a coffee club, particularly given that the demographic that they're probably trying to appeal to, I think is telling, and I think maybe more inclusive. And then I quite like the way that they've then got the players involved in terms of like, I think the players are taking turns to do like shifts as the barista. So like you'll be getting served your coffee by the players. So it's like a nice little touch point with the athletes. It brings them together in a way that I think is slightly unique. And then I think it also opens up a ton of other commercial opportunities off the back of it, because why wouldn't Nespresso or some other coffee related brand now be like, oh, maybe we could do something with Unrivaled, I just think there's so much that it potentially creates for them as a league. And like I've seen quite a few football clubs now doing, like, you've obviously got like PSG doing La Maison, you've got like Atletico doing like Casa Atleti. I think Juventus are doing something around pre-season called Casa Juventus. So you're getting like these like pop-up events, and I think it's that shift of like everything's digital, therefore we want physical. It's like almost like the equal and opposite reaction.
Yeah. It's interesting as well, because like it did sell out really, really quickly as well, and I think to lean into your point, like I talk a lot about streaming and digital and all those experiences, but I think what it is doing is it's fostering a craving for more physical touch points, and I think it does make life easier to get players to these kind of things when there's no alcohol involved as well, because I think you're going to just generally have less problems. And I think people potentially going to be a little bit more level-headed with their opinions if there's no alcohol involved as well. I don't think it does any harm. And you can see that Unrivaled are trying to make sure that they don't just pop up in that, month, 6 weeks period every year. They want to make sure... I think it's the same thing that major events like the Olympics have, right? Where they're going from one event to another, and then what happens in between. Like, you've got to try and keep those touch points with your fans, both digitally but also importantly physically too, in between.
Yeah, they're a tournament, right? So they happen during the off season, and they've kind of been designed in a way where like they're meant to fill the gap while the NBA season, WNBA season, isn't happening.
Yeah.
So they like deliberately sit in that kind of summer window. But I think the other point, and I'm not entirely versed on exactly how Unrivaled works, but I believe they have a fixed location, and then they play the occasional game where they go on tour and play at WNBA stadiums as well. But they have a fixed location in Florida. So this event happened in Chicago. So again, like if they're trying to build a fan base across the US and create resonance with other cities across the US, then this is an interesting way to do that, where you're getting some visibility to the players, you're getting touch point with the brand outside of those that are based in Florida or those willing to travel to Florida to watch kind of the regular games.
Yeah.
Because I think you've seen this a little bit with the other challenger leagues, like a Baller League or a Kings League, where like they essentially, and I think it's a smart model for a challenger league because it reduces your costs in the short term. It's like have a fixed venue, you build everything out of one venue. So Baller, I think, are based out of Miami as well for the US one, and then for the UK, they're based out of London, and they just play all their games at the Copper Box. Having a fixed venue allows for much better economies of scale as a startup league, because infrastructure-wise, like you're not having to think about moving everything around, and you just need one space. But then having this as something which can travel allows you to kind of create physical touch points with other markets.
Yeah, so you get hybrid, and also the logistics as well, that some players will be based in Chicago, so it's easier to get them to come to an event rather than having to travel down to Miami, and all the logistics involved in that too. So it is a two-pronged as well, definitely.
Yeah, you've probably got, I don't actually have it top of mind in terms of which players are there, but you probably have WNBA players for the Chicago franchise that are nearby and that also play in Unrivaled and can come along.
Yeah, without a doubt. Cool, okay, next story. So, Caleb Hammer. I mean, I didn't know who he was until I started looking at this, but for those who don't know, Caleb Hammer just built a second front door to his membership. So, from a membership perspective, YouTube takes 30% of every membership dollar that you generate. So what Caleb Hammer's done, he's launched a standalone app called Hammer Elite via a platform called Uscreen. He's currently got an audience of 115,000 paying subscribers, and that generates between $9.99 and $14.99 a month. So he's got the same membership, but he's done it on a secondary platform. They're not actually offering anything fundamentally different, but ultimately the secondary platform takes a much smaller cut of his revenue. And for anyone who doesn't know Caleb is almost like a US version of Martin Lewis Money Saving Expert, whereby he gives financial advice. He's got a number of different platforms. But it's interesting because we talk a lot about how do you off-platform your audience from places like YouTube, which are anonymous to you, and this is someone else trying to take a different route to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen this a few times. I remember an example I kind of cited to you when we were discussing kind of putting this itinerary of content together was Ninja, I think, back in like 2019 maybe. Microsoft tried to launch like a rival to Twitch or to YouTube. Called Mixer, and they did like an exclusivity agreement where they basically said you can't stream anywhere else, and it flopped because essentially all of his audience was on Twitch, and so like by not having that kind of like ability to kind of slowly migrate people across, it was actually really hard to get people to just turn up in a new place because the habit is around the platform, and as much as a creator might have some pull, there's an infinite number of creators on YouTube or Twitch, so actually like do you just end up shutting yourself out as the creator? So I think in terms of taking the hybrid approach, I think that's probably the right move. I guess the challenge is still like how you create enough. Again, tying it back to my own thing with Sports Pundit, I'm like, I have people on WhatsApp. Do I try and launch like on Circle or on like a paid Substack membership? My view is be where the people are, and actually there's more to gain out of having a wider like sort of wider visibility or like wider surface area in order to reach people. So I'd rather reach as many people as possible rather than be behind a paywall. And then ultimately I only need one or two relationships to be strong in order for that to benefit me. So I think it does depend a little bit on the type of creator you are and the type of products that you're trying to push. So I guess maybe he's made that evaluation that if he gets a certain number across, that's worth it, and he'll just continue to monetize the rest on YouTube.
Yeah, what's interesting about him is, like I said, and I made that comparison to Martin Lewis, right? One of the things he does is a show called Financial Audit. Now, you can imagine the way he's breaking things down for individuals, where there'll be lots of content you could probably put behind your own page. It'll be easier to find and easier to build your own search functionality around it. But interestingly, he said that YouTube's our bread and butter. YouTube's the platform we love until our dying days. But if anyone's a diehard fan, we want to make sure they could join us on our exclusive platform if they wanted. In everything I've read and seen, I've not seen what the value exchange is at the moment to go to that exclusive platform versus YouTube. Because, yes, if you're a member of any of these platforms, he's then giving you access to Discord. Well, Discord's not sitting in YouTube or this Uscreen platform either. It's separate anyway, and he's doing that for members. I can sense that there's lots he could do with lots of the content he's generating within his own platform in a more constructed manner. It's just not totally clear to me at the moment. It's like, how are you going to do you when someone's got to make a decision where to subscribe, how are you ensuring they go to the place you want them to, where you're making the most money?
Yeah, and also the 30% thing, you can argue, okay, that's unfair, but at the same time, how much of it's down to the platforms giving you that visibility, right? A lot of it is, right? So, okay, it feels maybe high, but ultimately the number of subscribers you're getting is probably more than 30% higher than what you would be getting if you were exclusive on the other platforms. So it's kind of it comes with the territory to some degree.
Yeah, I think Google, YouTube, they spent billions and billions and billions building this platform, right, where people go. Ultimately, it's their choice to charge whatever they charge, and I think you're right. Ultimately, who's to argue that percentage is high or low? And ultimately, it's their platform; they decide how they price that. I think with any of these kind of things, it's one of those that if you decide to do something that's off platform, there's got to be some value exchange that you can't get on YouTube. Otherwise, I can't see how anyone would see the point of going anywhere else than where they are. And I think that's the thing that everyone has to think about. And I've spoken to a few different companies who do this, who do memberships for exclusive access to events and things like that. Early access to products and services that they created, become a member off platform. Everyone will have their own way. I can see how the kind of content that he makes could be useful off platform, but it's one of those to sort of watch this space.
Yeah, personally, I'd go more down the Unrivaled route of do events, learn who your audience are through events, whether that's paid or free, and you can learn a lot from the events. You can learn a lot from doing master classes or workshops, or a lot of creators do courses, right? Which I think there's ways around it without kind of just doing
rather than repeating what already exists.
Yeah, rather than just doing the same thing but asking people to pay you for it in a different way or through a different platform.
I agree. I do wonder sometimes. Well, it's kind of like they think, well, I don't really want to do anymore. I'm already spending every hour that God sends to make all the content I'm making, doing extra effort as well. But I think, like you said, your example of Sports Pundit, right? You do these physical events for a reason. That it's to be more than just a digital community, to bring people together, because it's often the side conversations that happen are the things that bring the true value. And I think, like I said, the Unrivaled Coffee Club is a similar kind of thing. You will get insights by spending time with those people who are fans of your product and service that you won't get in a Discord or a live chat.
Yeah, I think he could probably make products as well, either with other companies. He could own a piece of a fintech company, for example, that helps you with money saving, like a Pleo or one of these other kind of fintech companies that work in that kind of financial services space, and probably make a lot more just funneling people towards something that he's got equity in, rather than another membership. Just feels anyway, we'll move on.
I agree. Okay, cool. Next story. So TikTok just told sellers, if the voice selling you a product isn't a real person live on camera, it can now cost your entire shop. So they are banning AI-generated voices and pre-recorded narration from all shopping live streams. The limit, though, is animated avatars can fill more than half the frame, so you can have some AI-generated content in there. But the violations are now going to start to hit your account health rating, which governs a seller's whole account. Effectively, you will start to get penalised if your content is AI generated, and you will start to get less access to audience. it felt like this was going to come at some point, and the platforms have been having to think about how to do this. But it feels like they're trying to set a standard here.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think there's always going to be that kind of, I guess, is lazy the right word? Content that just kind of exists. I mean, you see it on YouTube sometimes as well. Like if you're searching for highlights and the rights don't exist on YouTube, you'll click on it and it'll be like a photo, and then it'll be like a bot basically like reading you through in the game. You're like, what? Who's watching this other than they've been like scammed almost into clicking?
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't use a ton of. I've never bought anything off TikTok Shop, so it's slightly hard for me to judge it. But I mean, it doesn't feel like a terrible idea to limit the amount of people doing that. I guess what you want to avoid if you're TikTok Shop is just it becoming just all bots and like no human element to it, where it's just like this now has zero value other than just people bot farming basically, which I guess you want to avoid.
What I like about it is look and displayed like we live for live. Live is our USP. It's where we do the vast majority of our work, and what they're effectively saying is it's the last frontier of authenticity. That we don't want you faking this. If people are connecting with you for a live experience to do something with you, it needs to be you and not an AI version of you, which I agree with. I think that people want that connectivity, and if it's not really you, then you may as well just create some AI versions of VOD and put that out, right? It's that live moment, that ability to understand all of your personality and how you think and how you respond is the thing that really make audiences flock towards it and stick around. Yeah.
So I think, from that perspective, probably the right call. I'm curious what technology they use to ban this stuff, because if they're able to detect it here, should they be also leveraging that same technology to detect it in other parts of the platform? So I guess it comes down to incentives, right?
Yeah, exactly. Is the other things that they could be banning, if it's not impacting their revenue generation, perhaps they leave it alone.
Yeah, we'll see. But I'd be curious whether they can keep up with the technology, because you would imagine that the technology around kind of these streamers that are creating buckets of cash from AI generated live shopping probably aren't going to be willingly just like, oh yeah, fine, we'll just stop. We'll
try and find another way.
Yeah, there'll be other ways around it, or there'll be a human sat on with that, just basically just holding the phone, and then AI doing everything else. Or we'll see. We'll see how they go. Cool.
Last story. So Netflix. Netflix did their first MLB broadcast a little while ago, and it was panned as one big Netflix ad. But interestingly, they've listened and they've learned, and their second one was almost entirely about baseball. So, for context, Netflix did a $150 million 3-year MLB deal covering opening night, the Home Run Derby, and a Field of Dreams game. The opening night, which they did back in March with the Yankees-Giants, was slammed for cross-promotion over baseball. They did all sorts of stuff there. Look, they were pushing a lot of the content that they're making themselves. Whereas, look, they've tried to fix that. They did the Home Run Derby last week, and they kept the focus on the action. Interestingly, though, they brought Will Feller in, Luke Wilson, and Jimmy Tatro to do a thing around the Hawk, which was panned as being a bit cringy. But look, you can't get everything right? They've learnt, and they're trying to find ways. And look, there's a reason that they do these things, right? Because ultimately, they want to try and cross-promote.
Yeah, I thought it was quite interesting, actually. So on the World Cup broadcast yesterday, they cut to Will Ferrell, and he had the visor with the Hawk written on it.
Yeah.
So he's still plugging it at every opportunity, which I think is probably not a terrible idea, right? Like he knows that the camera is likely to come to him. So
definitely,
I thought that was quite interesting, because as soon as they showed it, I was like, why does this visor say Hawk? And then immediately you're kind of curious, right? So but going back to the Netflix thing, I think it probably does make sense if you're gonna broadcast the sport. You need to be the first and main priority needs to be serving the fans that care about that sport, making sure they have a good experience, and then obviously the more you can build into it, that helps across the rest of your channel is great. But ultimately, if you're going to own a live sports product and you're going to be streaming it on Netflix, you need to make sure that you're doing your best to serve the MLB audience that I'm assuming you're hoping are coming you're hoping that this is an acquisition tool or a
Yeah,
retention tool for those MLB fans.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and then if there is ways to tastefully get across other content, then great. But probably makes sense that they're prioritizing making sure they get the baseball experience right.
Yeah, they obviously thought that actually they could lean into the casual fans, the non-fans, that those fans would probably find baseball on Netflix and they'd be fine with the fact that they were cross-promoting and talking about other things too. But the reality is, obviously, if that's where you get that content and you're an MLB fan, you're going to go and watch it there, like you say. And then if it starts to spoil, I think this also explains why. Often when you see variants of content, so you could do, do the version which is just the game, right? Everyone just wants to watch the game, but also do the version which is more entertainment led, which is more, you bring creators into it, where people are willing and accepting to have an alternate stream that's going to be different from the main thing. It's not that difficult these days. You can watch it like this, or you can watch it like this, and then potentially get the best of both worlds. But it allows them to test and learn like that as well. But look, they have listened, right? They've tried to correct it from what they did. They're still getting obviously panned for some promotion that they did about Will Ferrell. But the reality is, what's the difference between that and doing ads anyway? They're trying to do them a bit more contextual. I think that's probably the thing that's irritated people. But I'd rather have contextual than breaking away completely from the action.
Yeah, and I think it would be I'll be curious to see kind of whether they do more live sport and what they kind of learn from this in terms of how they approach other live sport, because there's probably an element of this of just seeing like, okay, well, if we do live sport, how does it drive viewership of our other products? How do we cross promote it? Do we get a lot of casual fans? Because the other thing for me is, like, if I'm not a baseball fan and I see baseball on Netflix, would I click on? I don't think I would. So like, does it work both ways? Because like, from an MLB perspective, if you're thinking about the value of your rights deal, and to the point around YouTube being kind of a shop window, Netflix is also a bit of a shop window. So is MLB also getting promoted in other Netflix stuff that's driving people across to MLB? Because then it's a bit of give and take, right? It's like MLB is going to be promoting some of these other things. So we're basically saying we'll give you some of our fan base. But on the flip side, is Netflix driving new fandom for baseball the same way that Netflix has had a profound impact on the fandom of other sports through its docu-series and things like that?
Very true. Well, interestingly, I'm doing an interview with Tony Pasta this week, which I think will be out at the end of the week. And Goalhanger have announced today that they've done another deal with Netflix now, that they are going to be continuing to create shows around the Premier League season, when that starts in August. It sort of ties back to what we were saying earlier, that Gen Zs are quite happy to watch content in and around the event itself and not necessarily as bothered about the event itself. Netflix are not going to be paying the same kind of money for a show like that with Goalhanger as they are for MLB. I don't know what the scale is of them potentially viewership, because you're comparing what is essentially a UK market to a US market, but you go and do a similar kind of thing around baseball in the US, it's not going to cost you $150 million over 3 years. Potentially, though, you are going to reach a similar kind of audience. And then the expectation from the audience when you come back to that value exchange is, well, actually, this is about talking about what's going on in the game rather than the game itself.
Yeah, that's probably worrying, though, if you're selling the rights, because you're probably thinking, if platforms like Netflix and YouTube decide we don't need to pay for the rights, we'll just own everything outside of the rights. And we're not going to pay anything, or we're going to pay very little, or the money's going to go to these creators rather than directly to the rights holder, because the rights holder doesn't own the rights to talk about the product outside of the game itself, then that becomes a challenge, right? Because if there's still an acquisition element, and someone like Netflix especially, or YouTube, where they already have the user base, doesn't necessarily need to use the league in the same way. Like a channel like Peacock, for example, maybe needs to pay for the rights, because they're essentially saying we're going to leverage the brand pull or the loyalty of fans to get them to sign up to a platform that they wouldn't otherwise maybe pay for. Or like TNT Sports, I would say, is in a similar category, right, in the UK. Whereas if you're Netflix or YouTube, do you need to pay for rights? If you're not using it for acquisition and actually all you want is duration, you can probably get people for 3 hours pre-game, 3 hours post-game, and just that 90 minutes in the middle, you don't actually necessarily care about as much, because at that point they're less engaged in ads and they're less engaged in the commercial bits anyway.
Are you suggesting then potentially, if that happens at scale, a world where sports rights then start to diminish because the platforms realise that actually the talkability and the content around it is just as important to people? So then perhaps some of these big media companies are going, well, I'm not going to go invest in that right.
Yeah, I mean, they're already diminishing a bit, right? So I don't think you can say it's just purely down to that. But yeah, it reduces the number of potential buyers, right? Because at the moment, a lot of the power is in being able to play the platforms off each other, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, oh, Sky Sports, you need to keep paying, otherwise, maybe Netflix will come in and buy the rights, or maybe YouTube will come in and buy the rights. But actually, if they decide we're not going to buy rights, we're just going to own the shoulder content, then you have less buyers. Therefore, you have less purchasing. You have less kind of like leverage, I guess, in the negotiation.
Yeah, definitely one to watch. Absolutely. Cool. That's it, Andy. Thank you for joining me this week on this week's episode of The Attention Shift. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and if you want to feature as a guest, give us a question via our email, hello@attentionshift.media. I've been Ed Arbis, and this has been Andy Marston. Thank you and goodbye. If you enjoyed this conversation, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more videos just like this. And make sure you smash that bell icon too, so you're always the first to know exactly when a new episode drops.